Okay. What do you say to the current, can we say, misunderstanding or row between incoming President Duterte and the Roman Catholic Church?
I would like to say it's unfortunate. I have great respect for the CBCP, as you may understand, and I have great respect for Mayor Digong, now our president-elect. So I think a rift between the president-elect and the CBCP would not necessarily be in the best interests of the country. I think that it would be good if we might be guided by the spirit that he mentioned soon after the elections, that now is a time for healing. And I think that that may include people in the CBCP who have made statements on this and that during the election. I think Mayor Digong is delivering an important message to the Catholic Church. And I think the message is a message that he has delivered to the Filipino people in general. That the message, I think, is that the poor, the excluded, the marginalized, have to be taken seriously. And that the church, which proclaims itself to be a church of the poor, may have fallen short in fulfilling the expectations, first of the church, but then of the poor, in serving the needs of the poor adequately. I think beyond the colorful words that we get from Mayor Digong and his statements about and his expletives, I think Digong has shown himself to be clearly a man of the poor. And I think this is what the people admire in him so greatly. And I think that if there should be a dialogue between Digong and the bishops, it should be in terms of how can we best help one another to serve the poor. All right? How can the church, under these circumstances, complement the efforts of a president who may now wish to serve the poor? There. Yes?
Father, do you have any comment on how the CBCP has approached Duterte? Do you think it was out of line for the church, or at least for CBCP to comment on these issues?
Well, I think the CBCP hasn't come out with any official statements qua CBCP, as far as I know. I think Archbishop Soc Villegas has come up with interviews in which he, as president of the CBCP, expressed personal opinions relative to whom to vote for and whom not to vote for. All right? And his formulations were such that they were unmistakably directed at one politician. So it became very partisan political. And I think that may be what is behind the reaction of, of the president-elect to the CBCP. The CBCP is the group of leaders of the hierarchy of the church, but many people rightly distinguish between the CBCP and the church. Okay?
Father, may I just get your take on Mayor or President Duterte's pronouncement on the three-child policy, pursuing the three-child policy? Does this go against the Catholic dogma?
Mayor Duterte was what I saw on TV was the image of a family with many children, and the stories of the parents taking extraordinary measures. Okay, so there was no policy, I think, involved, no public policy stated, no?
Father, he was also saying that he is very open to artificial birth control.
That's right.
Is this fine with the Catholic Church?
This is,
We very well know that the Catholic Church pursues or pushes for natural birth planning.
that's right. So in this particular respect, if this is the position of Mr. Duterte, it would depart from the ordinary teaching of the church.
Father, in the context of dialogue, the one that you mentioned earlier, do you think it would be best for both parties, these certain CBCP officials and Duterte, to tone down the rhetoric?
Certainly. I don't think that the rhetoric is helpful for the process of reconciliation. I think it would be good for everybody to let Mr. Duterte form his government and perform and actually show how he's going to bring about the change that he promises. I don't think that we have to second guess everything that he's doing. No.
For people like us, many of us who are not from Davao City, who might misconstrue certain statements by the incoming president, how should we read him? Because, for example, during the press conference, he kept joking, for example, about encouraging people to join the Iglesia de Duterte. Parang baka naman yung problem has a lot to do with certain parties being lost in translation.
Yes, I'm not an expert decipherer of Mr. Duterte myself.
But they think the problem has to do with that. With certain statements that might be misconstrued as a joke or as a policy statement.
That's right. But I think that this is part of his style, and I think that he has to be interpreted in this way. Many times he uses metaphors, and many times he explains himself in ways that are jarring. But I think you have to be able to separate the self-expression from the truth.
But do you think he should also make an effort to be clearer next time? Because he's now the incoming president.
I personally feel that he has a way of self-expression and a language. It would probably be easier for people to understand him than for him to change at this point. I think this is his style, all right? This is the way he's been in politics for the past 20 years. And I don't think that it's realistic to, I think he's tried to take the expletives away from his language, and I don't think it's worked, no? So I think people are just going to have to accept that he expresses himself in a way that's different from politicians of the past.
By the way, before we entertain the next question, allow me to step in and moderate a little bit our press con because we're not ready for this swarm of press this afternoon. So we can entertain a few more questions and democratize. So we'll have one and then see ma'am at the moment.
Sir, but do you not see anything wrong with his expletives towards the church?
I would say it's unfortunate. I wouldn't want to use the word wrong. I would say both sides have to be patient with one another, all right? So that we can allow the truth to come out. You know?
Sige. Ma'am, next.
Good afternoon, Father. Would you be willing to facilitate dialogue between the mayor and the CBCP or the leaders of CBCP who he targeted for all this criticism?
I would not think that I would be asked to do that. No, I don't think that would be my role. No.
Okay. Another round. I saw the hands earlier. Si ma'am na naka-white and then People's Television.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon,
Nakaway
Father.
po mo siya.
Yeah, muna. Hi, good afternoon, Father. I'm Tyra from the Inquirer. Father, I just wanted to ask if you necessarily agree with his stance towards the church.
Do I agree with his
Or,
stance?
I mean, what can you say about his stance towards the church?
As I said, it's unfortunate that the language is such that a rift may seem to be in the offing, all right? But I think that the position that Mr. Duterte is taking can be interpreted to be a very powerful prophetic position, trying to help the church also to reflect on itself and to reflect on its own ability to be the church of the poor that it has for many years proclaimed itself to be. All right? He's saying, I'm not a saint, but you're not saints either. All right? And so I think he's saying, I have a love for the poor. Maybe instead of knocking me down, maybe we should work together. All right? Because if you continue to knock me down, I'm going to knock you down. Right? I'm going to knock you down more. Right? It's better, I think, to try to to recognize the achievement that this man has in reaching out and helping the poor.
Thank you. People's Television, I acknowledge first, and then you, ma'am, and then Caesar.
Okay, Father, of course, the Catholic Church is pro-life, but we know that President-elect Duterte is also planning to implement death penalty. So, how does you feel about that? And the second question is, where do we draw the line in not meddling too much in the reforms of the incoming administration, because there has to be separation of church and state?
Wait a minute. I didn't use the word the church shouldn't meddle. No. I think the church will always have to be able, the church will always have to be able to articulate its prophetic stance on any issue, especially issues which deal with justice, human rights, and the like. All right? So the church will explicitate and articulate its stance against the death penalty. There is no, I think, argument that the church is now against the death penalty. The church has been pushing for a long time a culture of life and hope and belief in the ability of people to change. And it has always wanted to protect especially the poor against legal condemnations that are often biased against the poor. All right? So the church will fight the death penalty and disagree with the president in his desire to implement the death penalty. The mayor, however, who is now the president, will also have to follow his conscience in wanting to be able to protect the common good by proposing this or that to Congress, one of which may be the reimposition of the death penalty. So the mayor has committed himself to be a president of the law. He will keep the law, but he may wish to change the law. And that, I think, is his prerogative as the head of state. He may wish to change the law, but he will go to Congress for this. He will not just implement it on his own. Congress represents the people, and the bishops may then go to Congress, but Digong will also go to Congress. And so ultimately, the people will decide this issue in terms of the common good. In terms of the common good, as is provided for in our Constitution. Okay?
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am, and then Caesar. This will be the last round of questions, and then we'll wind up after.
Is working. But let me just clarify if I understand correctly that you mentioned a while ago that you're hoping that the mayor or the president doesn't become a monster. What is the context of this particular statement?
Well, I hope that he remains true to his word, that he will respect the laws of the land. He will not work outside of the law. That he will not work with death squads on a national scale, and therefore become a dictator that in hubris, in excess, may become a monster, no? Because once you feel that you do not need law and you have so much power, that power becomes very dangerous, all right? As we've seen in the past.
But is he vulnerable to that based on how you know him?
Everybody is vulnerable to that, even me. No? You give me absolute power, I'm going to be vulnerable. That's why we have separation of powers. And he is respecting that, no? Yeah.
Sir?
Thank you, Father.
Father, you mentioned a common interest between Mayor Duterte and the Catholic Church in terms of serving the poor. So, how do you think can the Catholic Church and Mayor Duterte, or President Duterte, collaborate once he becomes president, and what kind of role do you think should the
I think, I think the church has to take a very, very humble stance, a very, very reflective stance. I think the public pronouncements that maybe a bit more reflective of the sinfulness of the Catholic Church, the vulnerability of the Catholic Church to its own foibles and sins, so that we don't be so judgmental and absolute in our condemnatory statements. I think we have to see that a great number of the people who voted for Mr. Duterte are Catholics, despite the fact that the bishops, or some bishops, were saying, don't vote for him, they still voted for him. The hierarchy has to listen to this. What is the people of God saying? In their choice of a leader who was so very different from the bishops. All right? So I think that this president is ushering in, for us all who are Catholics, a period of deep reflection on what we are saying about ourselves and how we are actually implementing it. All right?
Sir, do I take it also to mean that when you say a very humble and reflective stance, that also means to shy away from being involved in political issues?
I'm not saying that. No, I'm not saying that. As a matter, I would take an opposite position. Let's get involved. All right? But let's be positive. Let's work where we can work with this administration. Let's get involved in the environment. Let's stop the rape of the environment. Let's stop the investments in companies that are destructive of the indigenous peoples. Let's stop the development aggression. Let's stop the poisoning of our water sources in Mindanao. Let's bring real development to Mindanao, finally. Let's stop, finally, the war against the insurgency of the Muslims and the insurgency of the NPA. Let's really get involved, because finally we feel that there's somebody who can really bring about change in Mindanao. That's why we got together in the university to see how we can help, in this process. We're only a university, but I think from what we had here this afternoon, people want to help, and okay.
And the last question from you, sir.
How
Please
optimistic
press.
are you that Duterte and the Catholic Church would finally have a reconciliation?
Very optimistic. I can only be optimistic. No, I think I think that even the leaders of the church will have to see where the people are. All right? And as I'm saying, the leaders of the church will have to listen to what the people are saying in their vote.
Okay, so with that, we close our brief and quick press conference with Father Joel. We'd like to thank everyone, our friends from the press, for coming over and joining us. Thank you also, Father Joel.
Thank you for coming.
Graciously addressing us. Salamat po.